You couldn't make this up. Elizabeth Holmes is in prison, but her partner is quietly launching her sequel. Convicted fraudster Elizabeth Holmes may be locked up in a federal prison in Bryan, Texas, but her biotech ambitions appear to be alive and well. In fact, they're being reincarnated through her romantic partner and the father of her two children, Billy Evans, who has launched a new startup that sounds suspiciously similar to Holmes's original failed blood testing venture. Evans has launched a company called Haemanthus, a name which translates as blood flower in Greek and is also the name of a type of plant commonly known as the blood lily. The startup is currently developing a compact diagnostic device that uses tunable lasers and artificial intelligence to analyze tiny samples of biological material like blood, saliva, urine, and sweat. Sound familiar? That's because it's basically a redo of the ambitions of Theranos, the company Holmes founded as a 19-year-old Stanford dropout. Holmes once promised that her company's device, the Edison, would do something similar, run a full panel of tests on just a few drops of blood in a desktop-sized device. In reality, Theranos' machine never worked. The company was actually diluting the blood samples and running them on competitors' machines, all while Holmes raked in hundreds of millions in investor funding, including from high-profile figures such as Rupert Murdoch, Larry Ellison, and former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Haemanthus claims that its technology is different. It uses Raman spectroscopy, a legitimate technique that can identify molecules based on how they scatter light. The technology has been used in research settings to help detect cancers and neurological diseases like ALS. The company was granted a patent in January 2025 that outlines its spectroscopy system. While Theranos was well known to have packed its board full of elder statesmen with little to no healthcare experience, Haemanthus has claimed to investors that it has roughly 24 advisors, including veterinarians and diagnosticians, though it did not name them. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the startup, Elizabeth Holmes herself has been quietly advising Evans from behind bars. However, she holds no formal role in the company. Currently, she's under a 10-year SEC ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. However, the ban does not prevent her from influencing a private company like Haemanthus. Holmes has repeatedly claimed that she would continue inventing despite her fraud conviction. Even after her first company had been shut down and she was awaiting trial, Elizabeth was spotted at investor offices still seeking investments for a new startup. She seemed determined to plot a triumphant comeback arc. Holmes even named her daughter, whom she gave birth to after being found guilty, the name Invicta, a name which means undefeated or unconquerable. In a February 2025 People magazine interview, her first interview from prison, and almost 2 years into her prison sentence, Holmes said she was completely committed to returning to biotech after her release. There is not a day I have not continued to work on my research and inventions, she told the magazine, adding that she's writing new patents and intends to resume building affordable healthcare solutions for everyone. In an interview she gave to the New York Times shortly before heading to prison, in which she also reiterated her intention to return to the industry upon release, she was accused of maintaining the idealistic delusion of a 19-year-old despite being a 39-year-old with a fraud conviction. However, Haemanthus appears to have been incorporated only about 6 months into her prison sentence, implying that Holmes was, in fact, completely serious. Several of the startup's early employees come not from healthcare, but from Luminar Technologies, the self-driving car startup that Billy Evans, a hotel heir with an economics degree from MIT, once worked at as a project manager. Evans met Holmes in 2017, after her company had already been exposed as a scam in an explosive 2015 Wall Street Journal expose, and while she was already awaiting trial for fraud. Holmes is 8 years older than Billy Evans. When they met, he was only around 25, while she was around 33. The two became engaged in 2018 and proceeded to have 2 children, one while she was awaiting trial and one while she was awaiting sentencing. They have denied that the children were a tactic to gain leniency. Interestingly, during jury selection for her trial, Billy Evans's hotel magnate father chatted with the press, giving a fake name and claiming he fixed cars for a living. and accused the press of posting distorted stories about Elizabeth. No journalist has ever told the real story about her, he said. Everyone is just copy and pasting each other's stories without thinking. So it seems like Evans's own father, at least, was extremely supportive of Elizabeth, despite meeting her after she was charged with fraud. Elizabeth Holmes was known to have an extremely magnetic personality. People described being sucked into a Steve Jobs-like reality distortion field when they met her. Is it possible that the extreme level of support she has from Billy and his family, as well as Billy's willingness to carry on her legacy despite her history of fraud, is due to being drawn into this reality distortion field and being utterly convinced of her conviction to succeed? A question that remains is what sort of investors would give money to this new company after Theranos was literally found guilty of defrauding its former investors. Haemanthus has been turned down by major players like Michael Dell's investment firm and James Breyer, a well-known billionaire venture capitalist and an early backer of Facebook, who has said that he passed on Haemanthus for the same reasons he passed twice on Theranos, reasons involving scientific defensibility and clinical utility. However, sources say that Haemanthus has raised millions, mostly through friends, family, and sympathetic backers. One publicly known investment is an undisclosed sum from Matthew Parkhurst, a Houston area businessman with a portfolio of restaurants and other local ventures. The goal, according to Haemanthus's internal documents, is to begin with pet diagnostics, a move that cleverly skirts FDA regulation, which doesn't cover veterinary testing. But the company plans to expand into human diagnostics and eventually launch a wearable device for real-time testing, which has echoes of Theranos' original TheraPatch idea. They believe they can achieve their goals in about 3 years with $70 million in funding. So is Billy Evans genuinely trying to carry the torch for Holmes's once vaunted vision of accessible healthcare? Or is this just a repackaging of the same Theranos fantasy under a new name? The return of a blood testing startup tied to Elizabeth Holmes is a twist no screenwriter would dare invent. It appears that from prison, Holmes lies in wait, writing patents, plotting her comeback, and watching as her partner tries to finish what she started. So far, the public reaction to this news has been a mix of incredulity and scathing, with people comparing the venture to Firefest 2 and accusing any investor gullible enough to invest in this new company as getting exactly what they deserve if this too turns out to be a fraud. Let us know in the comments what you think and how you think this all will end. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.